questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live? There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate Podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cultivate Podcast with the Grove Church. I'm Charlie Lofton, I'm the lead pastor there, and we are with...
the Associate Pastor Abigail Boone.
Wow.
I've moved up.
You gave yourself a promotion.
Yeah, man.
Do I get a vote?
Nope.
No, you can
we'll take it to the elder board, see what they say.
Good luck. Wow. So,
no, I wouldn't do very good in that role.
No, I'm gonna be Archbishop.
Okay.
Of the Grove.
Pope.
Give me
of the Grove.
Give me a promotion as well. American Pope.
Yeah.
This should be a podcast. Write that down.
American Pope. Meet the American Pope.
What does it mean to us that the Pope is from Chicago? Really glad you are joining us, and we are in a series on systematic theology, and we have been covering all sorts of things leading up to this current section. We're talking about soteriology, the study of salvation, and this last episode, I would describe it as a rambling mess.
Goodness.
Where we just talked about the overview of the gospel centered around Romans 6:23 and kind of what that kind of encapsulates in the Bible.
I think it just came to me that word sounds like satirical.
What
soteriology makes me think of satirical.
Okay.
That's why it doesn't make sense.
Well, so soteriology starts with S-O. And
satirical is S-A?
Yeah, so it's
okay.
Soteriology and satirical.
Okay.
Gotcha. And so now we're going to spend a few episodes just kind of doing some deep dives into some key elements of what we talked about overall with the gospel. And today we're going to talk about the atonement.
Mm-hmm.
And atonement means...
reparations.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. Like
payment for and making up for something.
Paying back some sort of debt.
Right. Yeah.
Making a wrong right in some way,
mm-hmm.
right? And so there are a lot of different theories of the atonement as far as this is the problem that was solved by Jesus dying. And so this is how he was able to make the reparations. And I mean, there are all sorts of different ideas about what does it mean that Jesus died for sins? What does Jesus' death have to do with sin? And again, I recognize that there are a lot of them. And I recognize that even some of the people who listen may not be full board on the idea of substitutionary atonement, may have some other ones that they feel are primary. And, this
and when
secondary.
You say that, you are talking about other Christian views, not like other religions.
No, yeah. I mean,
okay.
Other religions would not believe that Jesus' death on the cross atoned for anything.
Okay. Yeah.
May believe that it's historical fact, but that it has no theological or personal significance.
Okay.
Right? And so we can spend some time talking about that, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to go with what I/the church believe to be at a minimum the primary theory of atonement that we believe in.
Okay.
And and the way that it is often talked about, and try not to giggle.
Okay.
The word is penal with related to
penal substitution.
Penal substitutionary atonement.
I don't actually know what that means, but I know that that's like a legal term, penal.
Yeah, like it means it's around law.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have broken the law,
mm-hmm.
and you have to pay a fine, you have to pay a price. There's a punishment. Based on the breaking of the law, there is a punishment, and someone takes the punishment. And so then Jesus then becomes the one that takes your punishment. The wage of sin is death. Think about that in terms of you've committed a crime, a punishment has to be paid. Will you pay the punishment? And so to go back to the thing that we talked about last week, when I'm talking to the kids about
what it means for Jesus to die for your sins.
And so they stare at me blankly, and then their parents get nervous. And then I let everybody off the hook by saying this. So I'll ask them. So like in your house growing up, what was like the big punishment? Like when someone was in real trouble, what happened? And so it can be anything from, maybe anything from spanking to timeout to now it's, losing screens,
Right.
those sorts of things. Like whatever the big punishment. I say, okay, well, what is the number one? What is the worst thing? Like, what is the one thing that if you or your brother or sister, you do it, what's the worst thing that you can do? And so, breaking something, fighting, going into your parents' room and messing with something. You get all these different answers, right? And so they'll be like, okay, so let's imagine that not you, but your brother goes into your parents' room and steals something. And they find out, and now they're about to enact the strongest of all punishments. But you're looking at your brother and you feel sorry for him because you love your brother and you don't want him to get punished. And so you look at your parents and say, don't punish my brother, punish me instead. And I said, would you do that for your brother?
That's really sweet.
Would you do that for your brother? What do you think what do you think the answer? What do you think? How do you think kids answer that question?
I feel like you go one of two ways. A, they know for a fact they're sitting down with pastor, and so they feel like there's a correct answer. But every kid I know would be like, no, heck no, I'm saving myself. Yeah,
to me,
it
really is. It really is 50-50.
Okay,
they're just choosing what they believe to be the nice option. Or they're just willing to be honest, like, no, I'm not taking a spanking from my brother. In fact, I'm going to watch and laugh.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
even better if they think it was something they did that I actually did. And I'm for sure going to watch it happen.
Right. Yeah. So it's and so then I go from that then to
what Jesus
that
did.
Is what Jesus did. So you committed a crime that deserves a certain punishment. And Jesus takes that punishment for you. Yes?
So last episode, you were kind of hinted on the idea of it was easy to convince people that there was a God, but that people were bad. That was a little bit harder to convince them on. But now it's pretty easy to convince people that people are bad. Sin is all around. We're broken. Would you say people also agree with this side of it, that there needs to be someone to atone? Because I feel like we do live in a very justice driven, I don't know that they always get it the way that the Bible would do it, but justice is in everyone's coursing veins, it feels like. Like, do you think this would register with people as that makes sense?
I think the challenge that people have with this conceptually is it makes God seem cruel in some way. That God somehow, he theoretically wants to forgive,
right?
But just won't.
Yeah.
And so, well, if I'm going to forgive, someone's going to have to die. I'm gonna have to kill somebody in a brutal fashion,
right?
That somehow that just seems bloodthirsty. In the same way, if I was like, hey, Abigail, there's this really cool group of people, and they live right over there. I want to introduce you to them, but just be aware they do a lot of animal sacrifices. Right? I mean, you read it in the Old Testament, and you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of gross. But you kind of put it over there as like, well, they lived several thousand years ago, and people did gross things back then. But like, if you were to experience it now, it would be like, what kind of backwards nonsense is this?
Right.
And that somehow we as a society have evolved in our minds beyond animal sacrifice, and that God is evolving with us. That the God that I know would have never asked the Jewish people to do that. The God I know would not feel like he had to sacrifice blood, spill blood in order to have forgiveness. That just feels medieval, barbaric, it's primitive.
Okay.
And so I think people are drawn to the idea of Jesus sacrificing himself, but the idea that it is in part to pay off a God who is owed some blood debt, I think lacks a certain appeal to a certain group of people.
Okay.
And so I think I find ourselves in a scenario where a lot of people who grew up evangelical Christians believing that are looking for alternative theories of atonement to go to.
Okay.
And we will, and again, I am willing to talk about this later, but a big one is be like more of a ransom.
Okay.
More like a ransom had to be paid to free you, as opposed to a debt has to be paid. And that certainly is like that God's not going to get on board until
a debt is
his
paid.
blood payment is made.
And it feels kind of like vengeance to people.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It just and yeah.
Okay.
And so, and I was thinking about this, and we talked about it, that if we do alternate theories of atonement, I want to connect them to pop culture ideas where the hero dies. And so in this one, it dies, and it kind of represents this one.
It's going to be a big spoiler alert episode.
As I think about this one, it's hard. I don't know that can you spoil a Charles Dickens novel?
Oh, goodness. What novel?
A Tale of Two Cities.
Oh, okay.
There's these two guys. One's really bad, one's really good. And the one that's really good kind of gets accused of this crime and is supposed to die. And he's in love. And so this one that's kind of really, it's kind of is like his doppelganger,
right,
dies
in
his place so that he could then live a good life.
Yeah.
Very, I mean, a lot of Christian allegory there.
Okay.
Of just, and that's the kind of idea. Someone is convicted of a crime, and I want to pay that for them, right? But this is that in that scenario, right? It's the bad guy kind of taking on the debt of a good guy,
right,
to kind of make up for his badness. This is very different than that. So
were you saying earlier that penal substitutionary atonement is different than just substitutionary atonement?
Well, it's just a very, it's just kind of nailing it down. It is a subset. Like Jesus died for you in your place. And specifically, he died because you owe a debt to God.
Okay.
The wage of sin is death. That this is what you have earned for yourself, and so someone has to take this on. And so because you are a lawbreaker. And so then it gets very much tied to law, which again I would suggest is overwhelmingly how Paul talks about salvation, and he always talks in terms of righteousness, unrighteousness, lawlessness. It's very, very, very law driven, and so this comes from a lot of it. This reflection on it comes from Paul, because he talks about it almost exclusively in legal terms. What is your legal status with God? Not, are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Are you a bad enough person to be punished? Are you a good enough person?
Well, what's your standing?
What is your legal status?
Yeah.
Are you right with God or wrong with God? And Jesus died to help you get right with God.
Well, he's making it relative to something. It's not just arbitrary goodness.
Right.
Or badness. It's in relation to a very high holy standard.
Yeah, and so one of the key verses on this actually comes not from Paul but from Peter. Did you ever do the topical memory system?
Of course.
First Peter.
Quiz me.
Oh, never mind.
No. Let me try.
1 Peter 3:18.
Oh no, there's no way.
For Christ died for sins.
So that
once for all.
No.
So Christ died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust,
and the righteous for the unrighteous.
And the righteous for the unrighteous. I think you're giving us an ESV version, right? In order that he might bring us to God. So there's there is definitely a substitutionary portion to that.
Yeah.
He suffered for sins once for everyone. So sin is the reason why he suffered. He suffered not because of our sin. He suffered because of other people's sin. One person for everybody, a just person for an unjust person, or a righteous person for an unrighteous person, a non-lawbreaker for lawbreakers. So one non-lawbreaker dies on behalf of all the lawbreakers.
Right. Because I feel like that kind of gets lost in those.
In order that he might bring us to God. So we were away from God, and he wants to bring us to God. And so there's something that is prohibiting us from being able to be brought to God. and he does it in our place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, if there are some ransom theory people out there, they're shaking and quaking right now because, you explain it this way. But I feel like that is
I'm interested to hear that because
a fairly straightforward.
I don't know what the ransom theory how it would be different than atonement.
Nice. So you're looking forward to this.
Yeah, because I guess I don't know the other theories.
All right.
But I do like whatever version you just read because I've always read it the righteous for the unrighteous, which makes me think plural on both ends, but really it's saying the righteous one for all of the unrighteous.
The unrighteous group.
Yeah.
So Galatians 3:13, Christ redeemed us. Redemption. And again, that is redeem is a payment word.
Mm-hmm.
And again, ransom people would say, no, that is what you do to a slave. But again, in order to redeem a slave, you have to make a payment.
Sure.
So the question is, who does the payment go to?
Mm-hmm.
Who's getting paid?
The slave master or the slave.
Right. And
is that what they're
right. And so who is owed this debt that has to be paid?
Uh-huh.
Is it a bloodthirsty God?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just like a rebalancing of the world? Some people say that it is, like when you sin. I said already kind of getting into this.
I know you said you were going to do another episode, but throw it away.
Some people say that it's Satan that you have to pay for. We'll talk about that later.
Interesting.
Like he owns you.
But he
once you sin.
Interesting.
You've chosen his side the way that the demons did. Another time. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us.
Mm-hmm.
For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just a very strong, not only substitutionary language. You were cursed. He became a curse on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and what's that? Again, a curse of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it is surrounded by this law breaking status.
Mm-hmm.
You have broken the law, and as such you are cursed. You owe a debt. You have earned a wage,
mm-hmm.
and Jesus is taking those things on. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you're in on that. It's just a question of
sure.
what else could it possibly be? Well, then I've done a good job with you over the years, Abigail. If you're not even,
well, it just does make sense legally that in our American legal system, you're working off debt to the American law, and that doesn't necessarily mean to like a family that you've harmed or whatever. It's just whatever the law says. But there's literally no way. Like, we don't even have an example of somebody substituting in, but that's the only thing that would make sense is somebody taking the place of the prisoner that's in prison.
Well, you certainly would in terms of paying a financial debt.
Sure.
If you commit a crime and you have to pay back $10,000,
mm-hmm.
the court or the person isn't going to care where the $10,000 comes from. If you owe a debt and I pay it for you, the bank isn't going to send it back to me and be like, I don't want your money. I only want Abigail's money. They will gladly accept a substitutionary payment.
Time served, like someone serving a sentence. We don't even have a category for someone coming in and being like, oh, I don't want my son to go to jail, so I'll just serve the sentence. Right.
And so now you're getting to, and so for all the times that I have made people who have other theories of atonement, I've made them upset.
Mm-hmm.
You have made them really happy right then.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Like, it doesn't make sense. If you commit a crime, someone else can't go to jail for you. It's like it logically doesn't make any sense.
Well,
someone else can't make that.
Though.
Do what?
That doesn't mean that it's not.
I'm just saying it does. People believe that it does not make logical sense. However, here's the thing that I think that we need.
But it does make logical sense.
We're not debating the other theories of atonement right now.
Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's illogical.
Just because I've accidentally tried and now you're trying. Let's get back to it because really this kind of is a pushing forward of what we were talking about earlier, the sacrificial system in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what were they doing?
Yeah.
Why would you sacrifice the bull, the goat, the birds, or whatever? What was this for? You did something bad, and then this was a payment that you had to make, right?
Have you ever wondered how they got the birds that they sacrificed?
I wonder, how do people catch birds?
Yeah, because every morning the cutest thing ever happens in Rogers. My niece wakes up, wants to go outside. She goes out, she goes, teet, 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 hug. And she runs at the birds and they fly away. And she turns around and she goes, oh no. So I'm like, birds don't want to get caught.
Birds don't want to get caught, and deer don't want to get shot, but it happens.
Yep, very different though. Catching a bird. Have you ever tried to catch one? It's like a dove flying around. Go catch it.
I have not tried to catch a bird, but obviously people are catching birds all the time. We're eating lots of birds.
Okay, so you're suggesting they killed it and then they sacrificed it?
No, I'm suggesting that people are catching birds in nets all the time.
Oh, in a net.
Yeah, there's right.
Okay, that's not high.
And then you keep them in cages.
And then
all you need is a certain number of birds and cages. Once you've got a certain number and you have cages, then you can
so they would just get a surplus.
You can produce as many birds as are necessary.
I see. I
Right.
never thought. I imagine them like run out into the
Like
desert. And go,
I have zero birds, and I've got before temple on Sunday.
Yeah, I got to
Saturday,
sacrifice 5 or whatever.
I got to catch 5 birds.
Yeah.
Mostly, I believe they were purchasing these birds.
Oh wow.
From people who were
bird catchers,
bird keepers.
Interesting. Okay. That needed to be covered because I never understood that.
How to catch a bird. Now I feel like we just need to get on a Google, watch a video on YouTube.
I just feel like it's not as easy as...
I'm not suggesting that it's easy.
Okay.
How did they get those tigers in the zoo?
Sure. But you could like tranquilize those. They didn't have tranquilizers back then.
But it's not that they never caught dangerous animals. I mean, it can be, you can make traps.
Yeah.
People are always making traps.
So like
people
an air trap?
Huh?
Like an air trap? That's another thing.
Well, I mean, you put the trap where they get their food. They don't get their food in the air.
Oh, and then like...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody who knows me is laughing right now because if there's anything that I'm not an expert on...
Animals.
Hunting. Well, it's a little bit like we talked about chemistry. It's like, I don't feel like I would be an expert on chemistry. And she's like, you feel like you would be. Well, I feel like I'd answer.
Yeah.
I feel like I answer your questions. I'm not an expert on capturing birds, but enough, I guess.
You've satisfied my mind.
Yes. So the sacrificial system was put in place, as Paul says, as kind of a precursor to this, to kind of point us to Jesus, to kind of show just kind of visually how bloody it was, to help them really kind of understand the depth and the consequences of sin, and then also point us towards this thing that was about to happen with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like this idea of a blood sacrifice needs to be able to make to help you atone for sins. It is not something that Paul invented.
Mm-hmm.
It is a progressive thing that is happening all throughout the Old Testament that points to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then Jesus then becomes, and again, this is not something that Christians made up hundreds of years later, and he is the sacrifice.
Right.
Pointing very specifically back to the Old Testament system of this is how you work to, this is what you were supposed to do to atone for sins.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what of I'm hoping this isn't one of the other beliefs and I've just blended beliefs, but essentially this thought process of a substitutionary atonement is that you would stand before God one day and he would, like, if you and Jesus were standing right there and here's Jesus, he'd be like, yes, you're good to go, and Abigail can pass. But it's because he's seeing Jesus for what Jesus did for me. Right. In my place, even though I'm standing right there, he knows that Jesus covered me.
Yeah, modern reflections of kind of what this looks like is, people always imagine a courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
People always talk about, and God is the judge.
Yeah.
And then, your case comes up and you're like, what are you, you're guilty of this. And then Jesus kind of stands up as your advocate.
He's
and
like, one of mine.
I got this. I got this one. And the judge and Jesus have an arrangement where it's like, anybody, you go right ahead.
Okay.
Interesting thing, because people also then will use arbitration or, mediation.
Okay.
Right. We've got two aggrieved parties.
Mm-hmm.
And, and again, judges. And so that's the interesting thing about the courtroom. It's like the plaintiff is God and you're the defendant, and the judge is also God.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jesus, and so that's why it's all kind of, it's a little bit difficult to put our mind around, because the person who is both the arbiter of this, the judge of this, and also the aggrieved party is the same God. And the advocate, the one who died for you, also is God.
Right.
Which is why Paul says that when he uses mediation terms, he's like, there's one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Just kind of talking about how he is able to play that very unique role that no one else could, because he really fully understands both parties, and kind of has for lack of a better word, it's not theologically precise, has a foot in both worlds.
Okay.
Right. All right. And so again, we're talking about other theories of atonement. We can talk about some of these, some of these concerns that people have. I mean, it wasn't like that God was like, well, I'm just going to have to kill my kid. Right. I mean, this is something that Jesus voluntarily and willingly did. It wasn't something that he was ever forced to do. This was something that he volunteered for. People get concerned about what this says about the wrath of God. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I don't know that I have a great answer to that, except that's the kind of thing we kind of need to start learning to put our mind around a little bit better.
That he has
wrath? That he is wrath. Because I think we just think we have come to the point to where we kind of equate wrath with cruelty.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting that, like, if you take any modern example of anything that our culture would deem bad, they would never expect a payment to not be applied. Like if there's some, I don't know, someone gets attacked on some campus, or someone is racially profiled, or someone is fined, and like whatever the wrong is, I feel like the American culture is like, they've done wrong, we need to make this right. And that's what that's what God is saying.
Well, you talked about somebody's being racially profiled. What if the person who is being racially profiled then lashes out at that person and hurts them? Does that guy need to be punished?
I mean, what the justice system would say.
Well, but I'm just saying, you're just saying I can't imagine anybody thinking that a crime is committed and not wanting punishment for it. I mean, there are certain crimes that we're always talking about mitigating circumstances,
right?
And it was justified in this sense, and it is. And there are plenty of people out there in the world that think that our system of our judicial system, with prison and fines being punitive, that the goal is to punish rather than rehabilitate, is in fact cruel. We should not be sending people to prison. We should be sending them to some sort of rehab program, not necessarily a drug rehab program, but something that is going to rehabilitate them in some way. Right. That punishment in and of itself is a sign of a barbaric society. And so then that God would be the ultimate person who is, punishing for sin. Just even the idea of punishment as opposed to reformation, healing, rehabilitation, those sorts of things. There are plenty of people that have that in their brain, and I think it is
like they would have a rehabilitation theology.
Yeah, I mean that God sees sin and he sees the damage that you've done to yourself, and it makes him sad, and he hopes you'll do better, and he sent Jesus to show you how to live and to die in this sacrificial way to help you get your mind together, not as a punishment, because I'm not trying to punish you, because I love you. Why would I want to punish you? You've punished yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sending Jesus to kind of help you kind of get your brain right.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Jesus and who he is, and you're like, wait a second, I'm living a really stupid life here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus, for showing me that and helping to heal my heart. And God's like, finally, you got it. But
That
it's
just
not
feels
like
it
it's
makes
not like
him-
God is up there just going, get away from me. You are sinful. I can't be in your presence. That we can't seem to put a lot of us can't seem to put our mind around a really loving God and a just and holy God. It is an either or. And so the people who spend a lot of time thinking about a just and holy God really struggle with the idea of the prodigal son's dad, who's
Right.
like a big hugger and partier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you're back.
Yeah.
I love you so much. And the people who are really big, Jesus is the kind shepherd with the picture with the little baby sheep on his neck, and
Right.
that somehow that Jesus would be a part of a system that involves punishing people eternally for sin.
That's interesting.
Right. And so it's
Well, that would almost just
either,
make Jesus
it's either
a
or.
good teacher, which I'm sure any of these would.
And
would cause someone.
And a good teacher would never be involved in violence.
Right, but I'm sure you would say anyone that would have a problem issue at this point, they would have to go really far back into their theological house and change who they think God is.
Right. God is good, therefore God is tame. God would never punish. God would, in the same way that the best sorts of parents in some people's mind are the gentle parents. I don't punish. I affirm and understand, and I listen, and that is what a gentle parent does. And then God is always the ultimate version of what we are in a lot of people's minds, and so God would be the gentlest one.
See,
and he would look at you, Abigail, as like, Abigail, it seems like you're having some big feelings right now. Let's just kind of talk about it. You feel like that was a really good decision that you made, and ultimately sends Jesus to kind of help you put your mind around what's going on with you and what you're doing with your life, not God as someone who has wrath that needs to be satisfied.
Right. See, the thing that was going through my mind is I got in a wreck in the parking lot here one day, and I called my dad, and he was like, man, that stinks. Call the insurance guy and report it.
Right.
It's like, you don't want to call him for me? Or you don't want to help me pay for this? But it's like, that doesn't make him not a good dad because I'm following the law of doing the steps that I have to take because I did something bad that caused me to hit someone.
Right.
But that doesn't negate his character.
Again, now I'm defending atonement theories that I don't necessarily buy into, but just kind of from these people's perspective is like, okay, well, you break something that's $2,000, something that your dad owns that's worth $2,000, and you're 8.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to be able to pay that back at 8.
Right.
Right. But now you are in your 20s and you have access to $2,000. Is your dad going to come to you and it's like,
it's time.
You better pay me back. You better pay me back. Would you think he was a good dad then? Right. And right. And so that's the idea that a loving dad would never carry around some debt sheet.
Sure.
Your sin has offended me so much that
I'm to keep it tabs of this.
Right. And so again, it is these sorts of issues come when we limit God to just one of the metaphors used to describe him.
Would they
if God is
that?
If God is only a dad, then debt repayment to the degree that we talk about it seems cruel. But if he is also a king and a lord, and he is also God, creator God of the universe, perfect and holy, then we have to expand beyond just he is the best of dads, because dad is not the only thing that God is. And so when we start limiting it to very particular metaphors, then we miss out on other aspects of it, which is why, again, they're probably on the other end right now, which is why, sure, Charlie, I believe some I believe in substitutionary atonement, but I don't believe that is all that's happening. There's
Sure.
more than that, because it's not just God as judge, it's all these other things.
What if
Which
they...
now, okay.
Oh, wait, I just have one
No,
more question.
you don't just have one more question.
Well, I will only ask one more question. Would they agree with what we talked about last podcast of the consequence of sin is separation from God?
But that's something that you did to yourself. It's not something that God decreed.
Okay, I gotcha.
Because he is so angry.
Okay.
It is just again, think gentle parenting with natural consequences. That's typically how gentle parents parent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you make a bad decision and there are natural consequences to that. Your sin has natural consequences, not God proclaimed debts that must be paid.
Okay.
So
no more questions.
No questions. I can't even not even begin to imagine how long this episode is.
That's probably really long.
It is really long. In my defense, I was trying to end it a while ago, but Abigail would not just, she just wouldn't accept the fact that, like, we're going to talk about this later. And then I'm not very good either at being like, no, we're not going to talk about it. Like, I'm not very good at holding a boundary. Write that down. Anyways, thanks for joining us, Abigail. All jokes. We're jokes. We're just joking, right?
Yeah, jokes.
Joking. Okay. Abigail and I are great. We'll go offline. I'll rebuke her later. Because I also have a wrath that must be satisfied.
Sure.
Anyways, thanks for joining us. Encourage you to come back. We're going to keep talking about this because it is, in fact, I believe, the center point of the scriptures, of our lives, and what it really means. What does it really mean to be reconciled to God? What does it really mean that Jesus died for us? So we're gonna be here a really, really long time.
Great.
This is not going to be our only overly long episode.
Perfect.
So come back next week for another overly long episode. And we look forward to sharing that with you. And as always, we'd love to connect with you. You go to thegrovechurch.org/connect. Let us know that you're here. You can find out more about our church. You can ask questions, anything you'd like. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Cultivate Podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.